You're a burden, Arthur, and it's time for you to pack your bags and leave, my daughter-in-law Vanessa said coldly, tossing a brown cardboard box onto the kitchen island right in front of my morning coffee. I sat there, at 66 years old, holding my ceramic mug, staring at the woman my son had married 5 years ago. Sunlight was streaming through the bay windows of the stone cottage, casting warm light across the quartz countertops. I had spent 40 years of my life working as a master stonemason, breaking my back under the hot summer sun and shivering in icy winter mud building custom homes across this entire county. My hands were rough, calloused and worn, but my mind was as sharp as the day I laid the first cornerstone of this house. "Excuse me, Vanessa," I asked quietly, setting my mug down with a soft click. "You heard me," she snapped, folding her arms over her expensive silk blouse. She didn't look me in the eye. Instead, her gaze swept across the spacious living room with an unmistakable look of ownership and entitlement. "You've been living under our roof for 2 years now. You take up the guest suite, your old tools are cluttering the garage, and frankly, having an aging father-in-law around isn't working for our family dynamic anymore. Julian agrees with me." Julian was my 34-year-old son, my only child. His mother had passed away when he was 12, and from that moment on, it was just the two of us. I worked double shifts, skipped meals, and put every spare dollar into making sure he had the best education money could buy. When he got a corporate job in finance and married Vanessa, I felt a father's ultimate pride. "Where is Julian?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle, though a cold weight was settling into the pit of my stomach. "He's at work," Vanessa replied glibly, adjusting her gold bracelet. "He didn't want to be here for this because he knows how emotional you get, but we've already booked a room for you at the Fairview Senior Apartments down near the highway. It's a nice place, Arthur. They have bingo on Tuesdays. We've given you 30 days to move your personal things out, but I expect the garage cleared by this weekend. We're turning it into a home gym." I looked at Vanessa's sharp, unblinking face. She spoke with absolute authority, as if she were a landlord evicting a troublesome tenant who had fallen behind on rent. But as I looked at her confident, dismissive posture, one single breathtaking truth hung silently in the air between us. Vanessa had never checked the property deed. She honestly believed that because Julian handled the utility bills and paid the local property taxes through his checking account, this 5-acre stone estate belonged to him. She believed I was just a dependent, widowed father living on their charity. I picked up my coffee cup, took a slow sip, and looked at her. "Does Julian know you are giving me this box today, Vanessa?" "It was a joint decision," she lied, though a tiny twitch near her jaw told me otherwise. "Julian is tired of taking care of you, Arthur. He just doesn't have the heart to say it to your face. We have our own lives to live. Now please start packing. I have an interior designer coming at 2 o'clock to measure the guest room." She turned on her heel and walked toward the master wing, her high heels clicking loudly against the hand-scraped oak floors I had laid board by board while Julian was away at college. I sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time. The hurt didn't hit me as anger. It hit me as a profound, sorrowful weight. I didn't care about the stone cottage, the 5 acres, or the market value of the land. What shattered my heart was the thought that my own son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders through the apple orchards when he was small, had allowed his wife to throw his father out like a piece of broken furniture. Had Julian really signed off on this, or had Vanessa taken advantage of his passive nature and pushed him into a corner? I needed to know the truth before I took another step. I got up, walked out to my old pickup truck, and drove down to the town square. I didn't go to a law firm or a government building. I drove straight to Miller's hardware store, where my lifelong friend Frank was stocking shelves near the back. Frank and I had grown up together. He knew every piece of land, every family secret, and every paper filed in this county for the last 50 years. "Arthur!" Frank greeted me with a warm smile, wiping his hands on his canvas apron. "You look heavy today, old friend. What's on your mind?" "Frank," I said, leaning against the wooden counter, "I need you to pull up the public land registry on your computer. I want to look at the tax assessment record for my place on Ridge Road." Frank frowned, noticing the strain in my eyes. He walked behind the counter, typed rapidly into the county clerk's portal, and turned the monitor toward me. "There it is. Ridge Road Estate, 5 acres, stone residence, workshop." "Read me the primary title holder, Frank," I said softly. Frank squinted at the screen. "It says, Arthur Pendleton, sole title holder and grantor, with a secondary life estate clause registered back in 2018. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. The memory of 2018 came flooding back. 6 years ago, when Julian married Vanessa, I wanted to give them a fresh start. I invited them to live in the newly built stone house on my property while they saved for a home of their own. To make Julian feel secure, I drafted a legal document. I granted Julian a conditional tenancy agreement that allowed him to manage the property expenses, treat the house as his family residence, and handle the routine maintenance. But I never transferred the master deed. The deed remained 100% in my name. I retained full ownership until my death, at which point it was supposed to pass to Julian, provided he honored the terms of the family trust. "Why are you asking, Arthur?" Frank asked, his eyes darkening with concern. "Did something happen?" "I gave her a cardboard box this morning," I revealed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "She told me I'm a burden. She gave me 30 days to move into the senior apartments by the highway." "She did what?" Frank slapped his hand onto the counter so hard the metal hardware displays rattled. "In the house you built with your own hands? On land your father handed down to you?" "She thinks Julian owns it," I said quietly. "Julian has been paying the property taxes directly to the county for the last 4 years out of his salary. I let him do it because he asked to contribute, to feel like the man of the house. I suppose he let her believe he owned the title to hide his own insecurities." "That boy has lost his mind," Frank spat, shaking his head in disbelief. "Are you going to tell her?" "Not yet," I said, a quiet resolve settling into my chest. "If I just show her the deed right now, she'll minimize it. She'll play the victim, blame Julian, and pretend it was all a big misunderstanding. I want to see how far my son is willing to let this go. I want to see if Julian has any honor left, or if he's traded his father's dignity for a life of easy comfort." "What are you going to do?" Frank asked. "I'm going to pack a small bag, and I'm going to watch." I drove back to the house at 4 o'clock. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, I saw a large white van parked in front of the stone garage. 2 men in work jumpsuits were unloading tape measures, paint cans, and carpet samples. Vanessa was standing on the porch, holding a clipboard, gesturing excitedly toward the garage door. Julian's sedan was parked beside the porch. He was home. I stepped out of my truck, picked up my old leather weekend bag, and walked up the front steps. Julian was sitting on the porch bench, staring down at his phone. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped, his face pale. As I approached, I looked up, and for a fraction of a second, I saw a flash of raw, agonizing guilt flicker across his face. "Dad," Julian said, his voice barely above a whisper. He stood up, avoiding my gaze. "Julian," I said calmly, "Vanessa tells me you two think it's best if I move out. She says I'm taking up too much room, cluttering the space, and becoming a burden." Julian swallowed hard, his hands trembling slightly as he shoved them into his pockets. "Dad, look, it's just getting complicated. Vanessa wants to start a family. We need space. The guest suite is going to be a nursery eventually, and having you here, it creates tension between us." "Tension?" I asked softly, looking my son directly in the eyes. "Julian, I built this house so we would always have a place together. I built the guest suite so I could grow old near my family. Did you tell her to give me a box today?" Julian looked down at his leather shoes. She thought it was better to be direct.
We found a really nice senior community, Dad. Fairview. It's close by. I'll come visit you every weekend. I'll pay your monthly rent." That was the moment the blade twisted deepest into my heart. He wasn't being forced. He wasn't ignorant. He was actively choosing to throw his father out to keep peace with a woman who viewed me as trash. He was offering to pay rent at a retirement home using money earned from a job I helped him get, while giving away the very home I spent my life creating for him. "You're paying my rent, Julian?" I asked gently. "Yes, of course," Julian said eagerly, taking a step toward me, desperately reaching for a way to feel like a good son. "I'll cover everything, Dad. You won't have to worry about a single bill. Just let us have the house. It's time for me to run things." Vanessa walked over, wrapping her arm around Julian, looking at me with a triumphant, condescending smile. "See, Arthur," she chimed in. "We're taking care of you. We're being very generous. Most children would just put you in a state facility. Now, if you could take your leather bag and your old truck, we have contractors arriving at 5 to clear out the garage." I looked at my son one last time. "Julian, are you absolute certain this is what you want?" Julian didn't meet my eyes. He just gave a small, stiff nod. "It's time, Dad." "All right," I said quietly. I turned around, walked down the stone steps I had carved 30 years ago, got into my truck, and drove away. I didn't go to Fairview Senior Apartments. I drove 3 miles down the road to my old stone-cutting workshop, a small, insulated building near the creek that I still owned outright. It had a wood-burning stove, a comfortable cot, a small kitchenette, and my old armchair. I unpacked my bag, lit a fire in the stove, and made myself a hot mug of black tea.
That night, the wind howled through the trees, but inside the workshop, it was warm. I sat by the fire, holding an old photograph of my late wife, Mary. "I tried, Mary," I whispered into the quiet room. "I gave him everything, but he forgot where he came from." Over the next 3 weeks, I stayed at the workshop. I didn't call Julian, and he didn't call me. Frank dropped by every few days with fresh eggs, bread, and local news. "They're moving fast, Arthur," Frank told me on a Thursday afternoon, sitting across from me by the stove. "Vanessa hired an high-end contracting crew. They tore down your old stone workbench in the garage. They've repainted the entire main floor, and rumor around town has it she's hosting a massive dinner party next Saturday to announce her new interior design business." "Is that so?" I asked, stoking the fire. "That's not all, Frank," he added, his eyes narrowing. "I ran into Mark, the commercial loan broker at the local bank. He mentioned that Julian applied for a $700,000 home equity loan against the Ridge Road property." My hand froze on the iron poker. "A home equity loan?" "Yep," Frank said. "Apparently, Vanessa wants to use the equity to launch her luxury boutique and buy a brand new Mercedes. They listed the house as collateral, claiming Julian is the sole owner of the estate." The entire picture was now crystal clear. It was never just about wanting space for a nursery. Vanessa had discovered the house was worth nearly $1.5 million in today's market. She believed Julian owned it outright, and she was planning to leverage my life's labor to fund a lavish, superficial lifestyle. She had discarded me like trash because I was an obstacle to her financial grandstanding. And Julian, blinded by fear of losing her, or perhaps infected by the same sudden greed, was letting her sign fraud documents right under his nose. "When is this dinner party, Frank?" I asked quietly. "Next Saturday at 7. She's invited 30 of the wealthiest people in the county. Local real estate agents, bank managers, city council members. She's calling it the grand unveiling of the renovated Pendleton Manor." "Pendleton Manor," I repeated, a cold, iron determination settling into my soul. "Well, Frank,
It would be rude if the man who built Pendleton Manor didn't attend. For the next 9 days, I let them dig their own hole. I called my attorney, Evelyn Vance, a sharp, uncompromising estate lawyer who had handled my late wife's affairs. When I laid out the situation, showing her the forged loan pre-approval forms Julian had submitted to the bank, Evelyn's eyes burned with professional fury. "Mr. Pendleton," Evelyn said sternly, "your son has committed bank fraud by claiming sole title ownership to secure a line of credit. Your daughter-in-law has unlawful possession of your real property. We can have the sheriff serve an emergency eviction notice on them within
24 hours. No emergency notices, Evelyn, I said calmly. I want you to prepare a formal revocation of life estate and a notice of unlawful occupancy, and I want you to deliver it in person." "When?" she asked. "Saturday night," I replied, "at 8 o'clock. Saturday evening arrived. The sky was clear, cold, and dark, sprinkled with brilliant winter stars. I dressed in my finest wool suit, the clean, dark gray suit I wore to church and special occasions. I smoothed my gray hair, put on my leather boots, and picked up a heavy manila folder containing 40 years of land deeds, architectural plans, and original construction receipts. At 7:45 p.m., I drove up Ridge Road. The driveway was lined with expensive German cars, luxury SUVs and sports cars. High-end landscape lighting, installed without my permission, illuminated the stone exterior of the cottage I had spent 3 years building with my own bare hands. Upbeat jazz music floated out of the open patio doors, along with the sound of clinking champagne glasses and loud, wealthy laughter. I parked my old pickup truck right at the end of the driveway, blocking the main exit lane. I walked up the front steps, pushed open the grand oak front door, and stepped inside. The living room had been transformed. My handmade cedar bookshelves were gone, replaced by stark white, minimalist shelving. My late wife's vintage rug had been tossed aside for a cold gray marble tile. 30 guests, dressed in tuxedos, evening gowns, and tailored suits, were standing around the kitchen island, sipping expensive wine and eating hors d'oeuvres. At the center of the crowd stood Vanessa, wearing a dazzling emerald green dress, holding a glass of champagne. Julian was standing next to her, wearing an expensive suit, looking noticeably tense as he conversed with Mr. Henderson, the senior vice president of the local bank. "And of course," Vanessa was saying loudly, her voice echoing off the high ceilings, "when Julian and I took over the estate, we realized the potential of this property. We've completely modernized the space, and we're leveraging the home's equity to launch our new luxury design firm next month." "Impressive, Julian," Mr. Henderson said, clapping Julian on the shoulder. "Securing a $700,000 line of credit against a property this solid is a fantastic move. We're finalizing the bank underwriting on Monday." Julian forced a tight, nervous smile. "Yeah, thanks, Henderson. It's a big step." "It certainly is a big step, Julian," I spoke up, my voice calm, clear, and carrying across the entire silent room. The jazz music seemed to fade into nothingness. Every head in the room turned toward the foyer. Vanessa froze, her champagne glass stopping halfway to her lips. Her eyes widened in sudden, furious shock as she saw me standing there in my dark wool suit, holding my manila folder. Julian turned pale, so ghostly white it looked as if all the blood had been drained from his body in an instant. "Arthur?" Vanessa hissed, stepping forward frantically, trying to cut me off before the guests noticed the tension. "What are you doing here? You were told not to come here. We are hosting a private professional event." "Dad," Julian stammered, his voice shaking violently. "Dad, please, not here. Why aren't you at Fairview?" I walked slowly into the center of the room, stopping right beside the quartz island. The 30 elite guests stared at me in bewildered silence. "I'm not at Fairview, Julian," I said, looking at my son with quiet, aching sorrow. "Because Fairview is for elderly people who don't own a home, and I happen to own this one." A ripple of confused whispers broke out among the guests. Vanessa's face turned from shocked to bright blotchy red with rage. "Don't listen to him," she snapped at the crowd, letting out a sharp, nervous laugh. He's my father-in-law. He has mild dementia, poor thing. He gets confused about property management. Julian, take your father out to the garage right now." She took a sharp step toward me, reaching out to grab my arm to physically shove me toward the door. "Get out of my house, Arthur. You are embarrassing us." "Touch him again, Mrs. Pendleton, and I will have you arrested for assault before the hour is out," a stern, crisp female voice called out from the doorway. Evelyn Vance walked into the room wearing her sharp legal suit, carrying a thick leather briefcase. Beside her walked Deputy Sheriff Miller, wearing his full uniform and badge. The room went dead silent. The guests backed away, sensing the sudden, overwhelming shift in authority. "Who the hell are you?" Vanessa demanded, her voice cracking with rising panic. "I am Evelyn Vance, Senior Counsel for Arthur Pendleton," Evelyn declared, stepping into the center of the room. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of certified county documents. "And I am here to inform you that this house, this 5-acre land parcel, and every structural improvement on this property belong 100% to Arthur Pendleton." Mr. Henderson, the bank vice president, stepped forward, his brow furrowed in deep concern. "Wait a minute. Evelyn, what are you saying? Julian Pendleton applied for a $700,000 equity loan with our bank on Thursday. He submitted documents stating he is the primary owner." "Then Julian Pendleton committed bank fraud, Mr. Henderson," Evelyn stated plainly, handing a certified copy of the master deed directly to the bank executive. "Because if your underwriters had checked the primary county clerk records instead of relying on forged tax receipts, you would see that Arthur Pendleton holds the absolute master deed. Julian held only a conditional revocable life estate permit, a permit that has just been legally revoked as of 6 o'clock tonight." Mr. Henderson looked down at the certified document, his eyes widening in absolute horror. He turned to look at Julian, his expression turning cold as ice. "Julian, you lied to the bank on a federal loan application." Julian dropped his champagne glass. It shattered onto the tile floor, sparkling liquid and broken glass spreading across the marble. He covered his face with both hands, trembling uncontrollably, unable to speak a single word. Vanessa stared at the document in Mr. Henderson's hands, her mouth hanging open in complete, horrifying realization. Her eyes darted frantically from the deed to the deputy sheriff, to me. "No," Vanessa whispered, her voice stripped of all its fake polish, revealing pure, unadulterated terror. "No, that's impossible. Julian pays the taxes. Julian signed the contractor papers. Julian owns this place." "Julian paid the taxes because his father allowed him to live here," Evelyn corrected her coldly. "And because you called the lawful owner a burden, gave him a cardboard box, and attempted to throw him off his own land, Arthur Pendleton has exercised his legal right to terminate your occupancy immediately." Evelyn turned to Deputy Sheriff Miller, who stepped forward with a formal court notice. "Vanessa and Julian Pendleton," the deputy announced firmly, "you are hereby served with a notice of immediate trespass and revocation of occupancy. You have 2 hours to gather your personal clothing and vacate these premises. If you remain on this property after 10 o'clock tonight, you will be taken into custody." The room erupted into quiet, shocked murmurs. Guests began quickly setting down their wine glasses, putting on their coats, and hurrying toward the front door, avoiding eye contact with Vanessa and Julian. Within 3 minutes, all 30 wealthy guests had fled the house, leaving behind half-eaten appetizers, open champagne bottles, and an icy, suffocating silence. Vanessa dropped onto the sofa she had picked out to replace my late wife's furniture, and burst into hysterical, desperate tears. "Julian!"
she sobbed, grabbing his coat sleeve frantically. "Tell them it's a mistake! We can't leave! My boutique launching party is next week! All my clients were in this room! We'll be ruined!" Julian didn't look at her. He pulled his sleeve away from her grip, looking like a man who had woken up from a terrible, foolish dream to find his entire life reduced to ashes. He walked over to me, stopping 3 feet away. Tears were streaming down his face, leaving tracks over his pale skin. "Dad?" Julian choked out, his voice breaking into a quiet sob. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't know she was going to give you that box 3 weeks ago, but I was too weak to stop her. I was terrified of losing her, so I lost you instead." I looked at my son, the boy I had raised with every ounce of love in my body, the boy for whom I had sacrificed my youth, my knees, and my hands. "You didn't just lose me, Julian," I said, my voice quiet, steady, and filled with a heartbreak deeper than any legal document could express. "You lost yourself. You allowed someone to treat the man who gave you life like garbage so you could pretend to be rich on land you didn't build." "Dad, please," Julian begged, dropping to his knees on the cold floor, looking up at me with raw, pathetic remorse. "Don't kick me out, please. I'll divorce her. I'll fire the contractors. I'll put your furniture back. Just let me stay home." I looked down at him. My heart broke for him, but I knew that giving in now would not fix his soul. Grace without consequences is not love. It's just permission to fail again. "You need to grow up, Julian," I said softly. "You need to learn what it costs to be a real man. Pack your clothes, take your wife, and leave my house." I turned to Evelyn and Deputy Miller. "Thank you both. I will be out in my pickup truck until 10 o'clock. I walked out the front door, down the stone steps, and sat in the quiet cabin of my truck. For the next hour and a half, I watched through the windshield as Julian and Vanessa threw their clothes into trash bags and loaded them into their luxury cars. There was no more screaming, no more proud talk of luxury design firms or home equity loans. There was only the quiet, humiliating reality of 2 people leaving behind a life they had tried to steal. At 9:55 p.m., their car engines started. They drove down the gravel driveway, passing my old truck, their headlights sweeping across my face one last time before disappearing down Ridge Road into the cold night. At 10 o'clock, the property was completely silent. I stepped out of the truck, walked up the steps, and entered my house. The house was empty. Champagne glasses sat abandoned on the counters. The bright white paint smelled fresh and harsh, and the marble floor felt cold under my boots. I walked into the kitchen, turned off the loud landscape lights, and lit a single candle on the island. I filled a pot with water, put it on the stove, and made myself a fresh cup of tea. I carried the tea into the living room, sat down on the floor where my late wife's rug used to be, and leaned my back against the strong, hand-carved stone fireplace I had built 30 years ago. I pulled out my phone and looked at an old picture of 7-year-old Julian wearing my hard hat, holding a tiny toy hammer, smiling at me with pure, uncorrupted love. I held the phone close to my chest, letting a single, silent tear fall into the dark room. My home was safe, my land was secure, my legal rights had been completely vindicated. But as I sat alone in the quiet stone house, listening to the winter wind rustle the trees outside, I knew that the heaviest stone a man will ever carry isn't the one he builds his house with. It's the crushing weight of watching his own child trade his father's love for a ghost made of pride and greed.